Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar titled The State of Nutrition During Pregnancy, Where Are We? Some of the housekeeping notes at first for your information. Where all the participants' microphones are muted today. If you have any question, we ask you to please use the Q&A box that is located in the bottom center of your Zoom Windows taskbar. The chat box is also available if you have any comments or technical questions during the presentation. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute website, and the link along with the slides will be emailed to you in coming days. So let's get started with the introduction and an acknowledgement. My name is Rashmi Tandukar Baukaji, and I am the Perinatal and Infant Health Program Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. The Saskatchewan Prevention Institute is a provincial organization. Saskatchewan is located on Treaty Lands 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, and the homelands of the Métis. We acknowledge that our work is carried out on and with people from these lands. We are committed to working towards reconciliation and strive to reaffirm our relationship with one another. Our organizational focus is to help all children thrive through primary prevention and promotion of well-being. We believe that all children, regardless of ability, have the right to the best physical, social, and emotional health possible. We provide education, training, and capacity building across a variety of areas, including fetal alcohol spectrum disorder prevention, child injury prevention, child traffic safety, parenting education, sexual and reproductive health, and perinatal and infant health. One of the focuses of the Perinatal and Infant Health Program, or PIH program, is to provide evidence-based information on topics related to nutrition before, during, and after pregnancy that is accessible to the healthcare and service providers working with the pregnant people and mothers, and to general public as well. So as we all know, healthy pregnancy, healthy eating before and during pregnancy is important for maintaining a healthy pregnancy and for the health of the growing baby. Perinatal period is a crucial period to promote healthy eating. So today we will explore the importance of nutrition during pregnancy, recommendations for energy, protein, fiber, and specific nutrients such as folic acid, vitamin D, and iron. We will also explore the supporting studies that highlights the importance of focusing on overall dietary quality of during pregnancy, and discuss some barriers to healthy eating in vulnerable populations. Here to speak on this topic today is Dr. Anne-Sophie Morissette. Dr. Morissette is a registered dietitian, a professor at the School of Nutrition in the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences at Laval University. She's also a researcher at the Research Center of CHU de Quebec, Laval University, and at the Nutrition, Health, and Society Center of the Institute on Nutrition and Functional Foods at Laval University. She collaborates closely with clinical dietitians in the province of Quebec who work in the field of perinatal nutrition to ensure that her research addresses clinical issues. She's also a member of Scientific Committee of OLO Foundation and serves as a secretary of the Provincial Roundtable of Dietitians and Nutritionists working in fetal maternal medicine. She has contributed to publications of over 60 scientific articles, and I am going to share her full bio so that I do not take too much time away from our speaker. So now, without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Morissette.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am very excited to present the results of some of my team's research with you today. So as you probably hear English is not my first language, so I'll do my best to express myself clearly throughout the presentation. So I appreciate your understanding in advance. First, I have no real or potential conflicts of interest. And secondly, throughout the presentation, I will use the term pregnant women to ensure a better flow, even though we cannot exclude the possibility that some pregnant individuals may identify as male. So the presentation will aim to achieve the following objectives. So first, define the recommendations for energy and protein intake during pregnancy, their limits and their applications. Define the recommendations for folic acid, vitamin D, and iron intake during pregnancy and discuss adherence to these recommendations. Demonstrate the importance of overall diet quality during pregnancy, and then discuss challenges and solutions for the nutritional care of pregnant women living in vulnerable contexts. Presentation will follow the following order, starting with a short introduction. I will first talk about recommendations and intake of energy, proteins, and fibers, which will constitute the longest part of the presentation. I will then present recommendations and reported intakes of certain micronutrients. I will continue by talking about global diet quality and diet quality in women living in vulnerable contexts. Regarding prevention, as you may know, optimal nutrition pregnancy allows to ensure adequate nutritional status, prevent deficiency or excess of certain nutrients, provide the fetus with all the necessary elements for its development, ensure appropriate gestational weight gain, and promote the birth of a baby with optimal weight. I won't talk about this concept extensively, but in recent years, several studies have shown that nutrition during the preconception period and during pregnancy also has an effect on the health of future generations, a concept that is now known as the developmental origins of health and disease. For example, overeating during pregnancy could be associated with a higher risk of obesity for the child, which makes prevention through nutrition during pregnancy even more crucial. In addition to its importance in prevention, nutrition is also employed as a treatment for several conditions during pregnancy, such as gestational diabetes, type 1 or type 2 diabetes, multiple pregnancies, or when women are in financial precarity or food insecurity. You are certainly aware that pregnancy is a complex period characterized by multiple physiological changes, which translate to increased nutritional needs and ideally with increased dietary intakes. However, it is important to mention that dietary intakes can be influenced by several factors, including hunger and satiety, nausea and vomiting, attitudes and behaviors towards food, perception of body image, sociodemographic variables, food insecurity, language barriers, etc. In addition to physiological changes, pregnancy is also associated with psychological changes and can become a stressful period for some individuals. On the one hand, an increase in motivation to eat well can be observed for both internal and external reasons. And on the other hand, an increase in the stress to do well can also be observed. Indeed, there are multiple recommendations during pregnancy that can worry pregnant women and make them feel guilty in some cases. So it is important to take these factors into consideration in the management of their pregnancy. So keeping these elements in mind, I will now talk about energy, protein, and fiber intake in pregnant women. Now I would like you to take a moment, think about the following question and of your answer. So do you regularly calculate the energy needs of your patients or clients? As you may know, New recommendations for energy intake were published last year by the National Academies of Medicine, and those are applicable to the general population, including pregnant women. These recommendations were later adopted by Health Canada and are now available in the dietary reference intakes. There are small differences between the 2023 and the 2005 recommendations, which I will address in the following slides. Here are the difference between the two formula for non-pregnant adults. The main difference lies in the division of formulas based on physical activity level for the 2023 formula instead of using physical activity coefficients. For example, a 30-year-old woman with a BMI of 29.3, considered lightly active, shows relatively similar estimate energy requirement between the two formulas with a difference of only 100 kilocalories. For pregnancy now, using the old 2005 formula, the same formula as the one for non-pregnant adults was used for the first trimester. For the second and third trimester, 340 and 452 kilocalories were added to the estimated energy requirements for the second and third trimester, respectively. The same logic was retained for the 2023 formula for the first trimester, with estimated energy needs in the first trimester of pregnancy being the same as for non-pregnant women. However, there are some differences in energy need calculation for the second and third trimester. First, a different formula is used for each physical activity level. Second, the current body weight is used in these formulas, meaning that the weight measured at the time of calculation is used. In the 2005 formula, we use the pre-pregnancy weight. Third, all formula use the exact number of gestational weeks. And finally, the most significant difference between the old and the new formula is the adjustment for energy deposition based on pre-pregnancy BMI. Indeed, for a BMI under 18.5, 300 calories are added. And for a BMI between 18.5 and 24.9, 200 kilocalories are added, 150 for this category. And the main difference here is that for BMI value of 30 or more, 50 kilocalories are subtracted. If we take the same example of a lightly active 30-year-old woman, assuming an excessive weight gain beyond recommendation, so here, equivalent to a total weight gain of 18 kilos, new formulas suggest energy needs of 2690 calories versus 2897 for the third trimester. When we compare the two formulas, for the same example still, the estimated needs according to the two formulas, we can see that 2023 formula tends to estimate our needs compared to the 2005 formula. One of the aspects that could explain this difference is the use of the current body weight in the 2023 formula, which specifically for this example correspond to a gestational weight gain over recommendations. If we perform the same exercise, this time for a woman with a BMI of 35.2, with a gestational weight gain within the recommendations, the results are different. Indeed, the new 2023 formula provides lower estimates than the 2005 one. Thus, the difference between both formula vary depending on the scenario. It would therefore be interesting to estimate energy needs in pregnancy using both formulas in a larger study sample. Before getting to that, I have a second question for you. In your opinion, do pregnant women adhere to energy recommendation or not? I may not have answer for pregnant women in Saskatchewan, but that is what we wanted to investigate within a sample of pregnant women from Quebec City. Before going any further, let me briefly present the methodology of the research projects and sample used for all data shared during this presentation. In our research laboratory, we aim to prospectively monitor different parameters related to nutrition during pregnancy. Through various projects, we have recruited over 200 pregnant women so far. For all these women, we have one visit to the research center per trimester, during which we measure, first, dietary intake using 3 24-hour recalls. Second, dietary supplement intake through a detailed questionnaire. And third, certain biochemical parameters through blood samples. Here are the characteristics of the woman included in the sample used for analysis in this presentation. So the average age is about 32 years and the pre-pregnancy BMI is close to 25. As you can see, our sample is not very diverse. Indeed, we recruited almost exclusive white women with a very high level of education and high household income. It would be important to keep this in mind for the rest of the presentation, as it is not generalizable. On the left, you can see the distribution of a sample of 98 pregnant women in terms of pre-pregnancy BMI, with most women having BMI between 18.5 and 24.9. On the right is the evolution of energy intakes illustrated in a black line throughout pregnancy. The first notable element is that in these women, energy intakes remain stable, relatively stable throughout pregnancy. This result aligns with what is observed in the available scientific literature. The colored dashed lines represent the average estimated energy requirements according to recommendations. As you see, no matter which recommendation is used, whether it's from 2005 or 2023, we notice that in the first trimester, on average, women are over the recommendation while they are below recommendation in the third trimester. Third, in terms of adherence to recommendations, which we considered as having intakes within plus or minus 10% of the estimated energy needs, we observe adherence rates of 38%, 29%, and 29% for the first, second, and third trimester, respectively. In summary, this slide shows that only about 1/3 of women adhere to the recommendations. These analyses will be further explored in the coming months by my research team. Another important element to mention regarding these results concerns the limitation associated with the measurement of energy intake. Although the 24-hour recalls we use are validated and tend to be accurate, they are far from perfect and can introduce certain biases. Therefore, these results should be interpreted with caution. Here are some key observations regarding the new recommendations. The equations are based on a recommended weight gain. This results in a different number of calories to be added or subtracted based on pre-pregnancy BMI. The formulas comprise adjust calculation for the exact number of weeks of pregnancy, which makes a lot of sense. However, the use of current body weight adds a particular component to the calculation because if the weight gain is too significant, it might potentially overestimate energy needs. Finally, those new formulas are based on very few studies. This opens the door to conducting studies that use more precise methods to measure energy expenditure, such as doubly labeled water. Now, one might wonder what to do as clinicians. Here are the suggested steps in the recommendations. So first, select the appropriate equation and calculate the estimated energy requirements. Then monitor the pregnant woman's weight gain and adjust the energy intake as needed. It is explicitly written that during pregnancy, monitoring weight gain is crucial. Energy intake can be adjusted as needed to achieve the appropriate rate and amount of weight gain throughout pregnancy to avoid adverse outcomes for the mother or child. I would add to this that it is important to pay special attention to women with higher BMIs. Let's now go into protein intake. The dietary reference intake suggests an estimated average requirement for proteins as follows. During the first half of pregnancy, needs are similar to non-pregnant women. But during the second half of pregnancy, needs increase to 1.1 gram of proteins by kilogram of weight per day. Dietary reference intake also suggests an acceptable macronutrient distribution range between 10 and 35%. But after several discussions, literature reviews, and based on many clinical observations in the province of Quebec, the Provincial Roundtable of Dietitians working in fetal maternal medicine has adopted this clinical position. So in the first trimester, we suggest to calculate 1.1 gram per kilogram of body weight per day. To this, we suggest adding 10 and 31 gram for the second and third trimester, respectively. Figure 3 reported protein intake in 155 pregnant women for each trimester. And once again, reported protein intake were stable throughout pregnancy. On average, 95 grams per day are consumed, which translates to a mean of 1.47 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. This corresponds to 17% of total daily energy intake. When we focus now on adherence to protein intake recommendation, we note that overall, women consume more than recommended. This translates into high adherence rates, particularly in the first and second trimester when both formulas are used. You can clearly see on this slide that if the EAR is used, very few pregnant women do not meet it. In summary, here are the key observations regarding proteins. So first, the average protein intake significantly exceeds the EAR. Protein recommendations are mostly met, except for the third trimester, if the requirement is based on the clinical position. And although recommendations are met, the percentage of energy from proteins remains in the lower range of acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges. And what to do with this now? So I think that you should use clinical judgment and adjust based on weight gain, energy intake, and other macronutrients in specific contexts, such as early satiety or presence of gestational diabetes, in which case carbohydrate will have to be decreased. During pregnancy, fiber intake is crucial, especially to reduce constipation and common discomfort during pregnancy. So the recommended intake increases from 25 to 28 grams a day. And looking into our sample of pregnant women from Quebec, we noticed that fiber intake is relatively high, around 25 grams per day, compared to the general population, which is around 15 grams per day in Canada. When we compare to recommendation, we observe an average adherence rate of approximately 27% across trimesters. Once again, as with energy and protein intake, fiber intake remains stable during pregnancy. As fiber intake is crucial, as I said, the Provincial Roundtable of Dietitians working in fetal maternal medicine has developed a tool for clinicians comprising various tips to promote the consumption of fiber-rich food. So this tool is available in English and can be shared with you. Now, let's turn our attention in some important micronutrients during pregnancy, namely folate, vitamin D, and iron. Okay. So one of the most important micronutrients in pregnancy is folate, as it plays several roles, including the increase of blood volume, the growth of maternal and fetal tissues, and the development of the spine and brain. A deficiency increases the risk of neural tube defects. And for those reasons, the RDA increases from 400 to 600 and the EAR from 320 to 520 during pregnancy. There's a specific recommendation from the government of Canada is to take a multivitamin containing 0.4 milligram of folic acid per day. There are specific recommendations also for preventing neural tube defects. I won't go into details for these recommendations, but you can note that higher doses of 4 to 5 milligram per day are only suggested for women at high risk, meaning those who have a personal history of neural tube defects or previous history of neural tube defects. A brief reminder before going further. Folate and folic acid are two terms designating the same vitamin, the vitamin B9. There are two forms of vitamin B9. Folic acid, which is the synthetic form that is found in supplements and fortified food, and folate, which is the naturally occurring form found in foods. So when calculating the total intake of folate from both supplement and food, what we did, we need to make a small conversion to express them in the form of dietary folate equivalents, which we will use in the next slide. So in this slide are the results of a study conducted by Claudia Savard, who completed her PhD under my supervision. On the graph, you have the intake from food in black and from light gray, from supplement in light gray. Of note, you can see a break on the left axis, which indicates that some reported intakes are very high, just there. Here are what we observed. So considering only food, most of women are below the recommendation across trimesters. Considering both food and supplements, only approximately 1 in 10 women are below the recommendation across trimesters. And considering enriched foods and supplements, greater than 80% are above the tolerable upper limit intake level across trimester, which corresponds to the maximum amount not to exceed per day. In addition to assessing intake, we were interested in studying if the same conclusions could be drawn from analysis on blood folate levels at each trimester. This allows us to have a better idea of what is actually happening in the body. So this work was realized by Audrey Saint-Laurent, a current PhD student under my supervision. So on the graph, you can see the serum levels at each trimester. For two groups of women. Represented by black dots are the serum concentration of women with a BMI below 25, and represented by white triangles are the women with a BMI above 25. So here are what we found. So almost all women had sufficient serum folate concentration at each trimester, which is associated with a decrease in the risk of neural tube defect. Greater than 70% at high serum folate at each trimester. And we observe a stability of serum folate concentration across trimesters. And we found similar folate concentration regardless of pre-pregnancy BMI. Another point to note is that at each trimester, folic acid intake from supplements during pregnancy is an important predictor of serum folate concentration. These results are consistent with findings from other Canadian studies. Firstly, Moore and colleagues from Ontario found that considering both food and supplements, the median folate intake of dietary folate equivalent per day was 1963, while our study found 1775. They also found that 90% of women reached the recommendations, but that 77% exceeded the upper limit, which is similar to our results. Secondly, in the Meyer study, which is a pan-Canadian study, they found that 95% of participants reached or exceeded the recommendation for folic acid through supplement only, and that more than 99% of participants had a total plasma folate status, indicating the maximum reduction in the risk of neural tube defect, regardless of the dose of folic acid supplement. So after seeing our results and results from others regarding folate, you may ask yourself, could high folate intakes present risk for pregnant women? Unfortunately, to this day, data are insufficient to properly answer this question. What we know is that in animals, excessive folate intake in early stages of development can program metabolic dysfunction, such as insulin resistance. And while human evidence regarding excessive maternal folate exposure is currently scarce, human studies suggest that folate adequacy in pregnancy is not detrimental for metabolic function of the offspring. And from a clinical perspective, with your patients, it can be interesting to validate the amount they take to ensure that it is sufficient, but not too high. Let us now proceed with another important nutrient, vitamin D, which contributes to the development of fetal skeleton, the integrity of mother's bones, and plays extra osseous roles. A deficiency in vitamin D is associated with an increase of bone problems and also with gestational diabetes. Available studies are contradictory regarding the increased risk of gestational hypertension, intrauterine growth retardation, miscarriage, stillbirths, and preterm births. Dietary reference intake are similar to non-pregnant individuals. And recently, the Canadian government made the following statement. So, since vitamin D is found in very few food, consume foods containing vitamin D or take a supplement on 400 international units of vitamin D every day. In the same study presented earlier, Claudia also investigated vitamin D intake from food and supplement, and here are the main findings. So considering only food, a vast majority are below the recommendations across trimesters. Considering both food and supplement now, approximately 1/4 of women is below the recommendation across trimesters. And considering both food and supplement, only one individual is above the upper limit across trimesters. To complete this paper story, Claudia also investigated the vitamin D status by measuring the concentration of 25-OHD, which is the main biomarker of vitamin D, and this she did it at each trimester. And we found that a majority of women had vitamin D 25-OHD concentration within the recommended threshold, that plasma concentration increased through trimesters, and that women with a BMI greater than 30 had lower vitamin D concentrations than those with a BMI less than 25, and in the first and in the third trimester. And one other important finding was that vitamin D from supplements was the most significant determinant of plasma 25-OHD. Our findings are once again similar to the two Canadian studies presented earlier. First, considering both food and supplements, the vitamin D intake was 564 international units a day, while we observe it at 632, which is pretty similar. Second, 83% reached the recommendations, and third, only 1.7% exceeded the upper limit. Regarding the Meyer study, they found that the average concentrations of 25-OHD increased from the first to the third trimester, as we found, and that not taking a multivitamin early in pregnancy reduced the chances of having a 25-OHD level greater than 40 nanomolar. So the complexity of factors involved in the regulation and assessment of vitamin D homeostasis, including race, sunlight exposure, dietary habits, and laboratory measurement techniques, makes the interpretation of relevant research results challenging. It is therefore seems important at the clinical level to measure 25-OHD when it's possible in patients who may be at higher risk of vitamin D deficiency. I will now conclude this brief overview of micronutrients by discussing iron, which also plays crucial roles during pregnancy, notably in increasing hemoglobin mass and contributing to brain growth. Iron deficiency is associated with an increased risk in anemia, some maternal complications such as premature births and cesarean section, as well as some neurodevelopmental disorders. During pregnancy, the RDA increases from 18 to 25 to 27 milligram, as the EAR increases from 8.1 to 22 milligram. The Canadian government emphasizes the importance of taking a multivitamin containing between 16 and 20 milligrams daily. In the study conducted by Claudia, presented earlier, we also examined iron intake in each trimester and found that, considering only food, almost all women are below the recommendations across trimesters. And considering both food and supplement, approximately 1/5 of women are below the recommendation across trimesters. And considering both food and supplement, approximately 40% are above the upper limit across trimester. Like folic acid, the risks associated with high iron intake are not yet understood. And additionally, for this nutrient, we were unable, due to methodological reasons, to measure blood concentrations to obtain data on iron status like we did for folate and vitamin D. Indeed, iron status is challenging to measure as it involves a lot of biomarkers. In addition, the prevalence of anemia and iron deficiency is variable and depends on the measurement method used and the study population. From a clinical perspective, it remains important to monitor biochemical parameters related to iron status and adjust supplement intake accordingly. Now, what can we conclude based on the presented results for folate, vitamin D, and iron intakes? So that a significant proportion of women have high folate intake or concentrations, that it is important to validate reported dietary intakes with biomarkers, and that taking a multivitamin is a significant, if not essential, contributor to iron, vitamin D, and folic acid intake. So its use should be encouraged. Lastly, I would recommend that it is important to validate the amounts of key micronutrients taken by your clients to ensure they are sufficient, but not too high. Regarding the intake of the multivitamin, which is really important, in our study on micronutrients, we reported a high rate of multivitamin intake by pregnant women, which varies between 86 and 79%. Similar percentages are also reported in other Canadian studies. Nevertheless, since not all women take one, so I think it is important from a clinical standpoint to encourage multivitamin intake. In response to that, our practice group developed a decision tree that helps find solutions depending on the several reasons women may have for not taking their multivitamin. For example, if a woman is experiencing constipation, she can skip the tablet for 3 or 4 days, resume the tablet every third day for 1 week, then every second day the following week. So there are solutions. This tool can be also shared with you if you are interested. So we are now at the last third of today's presentation. I hope you haven't fallen asleep and that you enjoy my accent. Now let's talk about diet quality. While the presentation so far has been focused on specific nutrients, I believe that is extremely important to take a more global look at nutrition during pregnancy. In fact, all current guidelines emphasize the importance of diet quality, often mentioning the need for healthy eating habits, as it is the case in the Canada's food guide, as you can see. It is also mentioned in the pregnancy guide produced by the Government of Canada. In the province of Quebec, we have a guide from tiny to toddler, which is given to every pregnant woman, which also emphasizes the importance of eating well during pregnancy and includes recommendations like eat a variety of foods and add lots of color to your plate. Healthy eating during pregnancy is also a recommendation conveyed in your province and by the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. So I particularly enjoy the following tip: eat twice as healthy, not twice as much. In the Canada's food guide, these recommendations are encompassed in a visual plate that suggests ideal proportions of healthy foods to include in each meal. In the province of Quebec, the plate from the food guide is adapted by the Holo Foundation, which is a foundation responsible for a perinatal program in the province of Quebec. So this plate is divided into thirds. This plate is most commonly used by clinical dietitians in Quebec. One of the most commonly used index in Canada is the Canadian adaptation of the Healthy Eating Index, which measures adherence to dietary recommendations included in the 2007 Canada's Food Guide. A new index was recently published, the Healthy Eating Food Index, the HEFI, which measures adherence to the healthy eating recommendations for the 2019 Canadian Food Guide. However, since it was not available at the time of the following study, all results that I will present in the next slides were obtained using the Canadian adaptation of the Healthy Eating Index, the CHEI. This index measures two sets of components, namely adequacy and moderation. The adequacy is measured by summing up the components favorable to a good diet. For instance, if a person meets recommendations of 4 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, they score 10 points. In addition to this, points are added for the moderation score, this time calculated in reverse. So if the consumption falls below the recommended thresholds, the scores are higher. Finally, those two components are added together out of a total of 100. And although it is a somewhat crude classification, it can be said that if the score is above 80 points, the diet is considered good. Scores between 50 and 80 indicate that diet need improvement, while scores below 50 are considered of low quality, again, according to the 2007 Canada's Food Guide. So let me ask you a last question. So according to you, do pregnant women have a good diet quality? This question was the basis of another study conducted by Claudia Savard. Data from this study show that overall diet quality could be improved because we obtained score around 60 out of 100. Moreover, we demonstrate that the CHEI tend to decrease as pregnancy progresses. Specifically, the total adequacy score decreased significantly, as did the total vegetables and fruit score. The score related to saturated fat also decreased during pregnancy, meaning that in our sample, saturated fat consumption increased as pregnancy advanced. We also found that younger women with a higher BMI, lower education level, and less nutrition knowledge are the most at risk of having a poorer diet quality. Hence, we could hypothesize that women presenting those characteristics could benefit the most from dietary intervention. Our research team is also interested in measuring the change in diet quality from preconception to the first trimester. So preliminary results that Audrey Saint-Laurent is currently working on show a trend towards a higher diet quality during pregnancy compared to the preconception period, even without any intervention. So this may reflect a greater motivation to eat well once the woman finds out she is pregnant. Émilie Bernier, during her master's degree, looked into potential association between diet quality and metabolic markers. So far, some authors have shown that a better diet quality during pregnancy is associated with better pregnancy outcomes, such as a reduced risk of gestational diabetes mellitus. Accordingly, our results demonstrate that in the first and in the third trimesters, women with a lower diet quality, illustrated by green circles, had higher level of fasting insulin. In that same paper, she demonstrated that overall, better diet quality starting from early pregnancy, characterized by increased intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and reduced consumption of red or processed meats and sugary beverages, correlates with enhanced metabolic health throughout the entire pregnancy. So let me conclude this section with a few summary statements. So first, diet quality tends to be higher in the first trimester when compared to the preconception period. Diet quality tends to decrease during pregnancy. Diet quality in early pregnancy is associated with metabolic health throughout pregnancy. And finally, overall diet quality can be improved in preconception and pregnancy. It would be important, therefore, to work with your clients towards a more comprehensive view of their diet to maximize its quality. The use of the hollow plate can be a good starting point. In response to this finding, our research team is currently conducting an intervention study, which is funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, with the objective to examine whether an intervention aimed at promoting an healthy diet improves glucose homeostasis in women who are at risk of gestational diabetes. So our hypothesis is that the intervention is effective in improving glucose homeostasis in those women. So we aim to recruit 150 women at risk of GDM. We are very excited because to this day, we have recruited 50 participants. So thanks to my research team. In the longer term, we hope that this project will contribute to better nutritional management in women at risk of gestational diabetes, starting from early pregnancy. Let's conclude the presentation by addressing the nutritional care of women living in vulnerable contexts. For this particular topic, which is not my expertise, I want to acknowledge Professor Elise Carbonneau and registered dietitian Suzanne Lepage for their help. So first, one element that can characterize pregnant women living in vulnerable contexts is food insecurity, which is defined as the inability to acquire or consume an adequate diet quality or sufficient quantity of food in socially acceptable ways, or the uncertainty that one will be able to do so. Household food insecurity is often linked with the household's financial ability to access adequate food. So this social context makes it difficult for pregnant women to meet nutritional needs, especially in terms of proteins, vegetables, and fruits. It makes it more difficult dealing with anemia and gestational diabetes. In response to that, health professionals should make nutritional education on low-cost proteins, frozen and canned foods, and show how to save money at the grocery store. They should make referrals to community organizations, if possible, and food banks, and they should emphasize the importance of the prenatal multivitamin containing iron. Another notable context is recent immigration, which makes it hard for women to find foods that they are used to. It makes it hard to women make healthy food choice when you don't recognize the foods. So in response to that, health professionals should adapt recommendations to foods that are familiar to women and explaining how to cook with unfamiliar foods easily accessible. They should have knowledge of the food habits of the main regions of origin of the immigrants. Here is now the example of Alima, a center located in the city of Montreal, which supports pregnant women living in vulnerable contexts. So they place a social nutrition approach as the heart of provided care for these clients. So based on nutritional recommendations adapted to meeting the needs of pregnant women living in difficult circumstances and aim at reducing poverty, the social nutrition approach takes into account a number of health determinants in order to provide interdisciplinary intervention, enabling women to give birth to healthy babies, to nurture their babies' optimal development, and to flourish as parent and community citizen. So it's a broader vision of only nutrition. And the intervention providers work with women based on their family's need, abilities, and potential to improve the condition in which their children will develop by facilitating access to a range of material, professional, community, institutional, and other resources. Multiple intervention techniques are used, such as individual counseling, group workshop, partnership with community organizations. In an ongoing project under the leadership of Dr. Elise Carbonneau, researcher and professor at Université Laval, and in collaboration with Alima that I just presented, we are working on the development and validation of a brief diet quality assessment tool for pregnancy in women living in vulnerable contexts. Because we know that available validated dietary assessment tools for pregnant individuals are generally time-consuming and less suitable for immigrants or for women of low socioeconomic status. So the specific objective of this project is to develop a brief, rapid, and user-friendly screening tool aimed at assessing the diet quality of pregnant individuals and guiding the nutritional intervention, and standardizing dietary assessment to facilitate the use of nutritional data for research projects. We also have the objective to validate this new tool with pregnant women living in vulnerable situations. So therefore, once this work is completed, we aim to have an effective and useful tool for clinicians working with pregnant individuals in vulnerable contexts, and that could be shared on a larger scale. As the presentation is coming to an end, I wanted to leave you with some take-home messages. So first, some of these messages may be well known to you, but can nonetheless be reassuring for your clinical practice. So you are encouraged to calculate energy and protein needs as a reference only. Adjust energy and proteins needs based on the evolution of the clinical picture, such baby's growth, gestational weight gain, and specific conditions. Encourage the intake of multivitamin. Aim for the improvement of overall diet quality, and adjust nutritional recommendations based on the vulnerability context of pregnant women. So feel free to reach out with me if you have any questions following this webinar. And in conclusion, I want to take the time to thank my entire research team. During the presentation, we have seen the work of several students who have evolved in my team in recent years, and without them, none of this is possible. So thanks also to all research collaborators who are essential to the realization of research work. A huge thank you as well to the research participants and funding agencies, and thank you for your attention. I'm now ready to answer your questions if you have.
Oh, Dr. Morse, thank you for this wonderful presentation. We already have one question. It is, if women are dealing with a lot of nausea and lack of appetite, are there specific nutrients that they should focus on more than others if they have limited intake of food?
It's kind of a difficult situation, and in those cases, some women are not able to eat like healthy food. They can only like eat some crackers or something like that. I think that if she is able to take her multivitamin, this is the first thing. I think it is important, and then eat what she can. It's the only thing I can say, because I know this is kind of tricky sometimes just to eat in those situations. Yeah.
Thank you. Second question here. Do you know of resources for professionals who work with newcomers, immigrants, that list healthy food alternatives if the professionals are not familiar with the foods?
Yes. I'm trying to remember, but I thought I talked about Alima, which is an organization in Montreal, and they produce a guide who shows a lot of food type according to the place the women came. So I don't have the name, but I can share the reference with you. This is really a good guide that can really help to know those foods. Yeah, I will
Sure.
share with you.
Okay. If you have the link or the PDF,
Yes,
you can send it to me and I can share with the whole group.
great.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. So Jenna asked, if I'm curious on your opinion of taking omega-3 FA supplements during pregnancy. In addition, what are your thoughts on taking probiotics during pregnancy? Is there any clear evidence to support either of these supplements?
Okay. First, for the omega-3, in our research, we didn't investigate much omega-3, but I know that in some study, they demonstrated that often ADH are that women do not necessarily meet recommendations for omega-3 recommendations. There are different practices in Quebec. Some clinicians want to add some omega-3 supplements, but others don't. This is kind of not, there's no clear guideline of what to do with that. I think that as a dietitian, I would emphasize to consume food containing omega-3, if possible, from fishes. But in the case that it is not impossible, we can recommend supplements. So this is the first answer for omega-3. I hope I was clear. And the second question was about probiotics. To be honest, I don't know. I didn't look into scientific literature, so I don't want to venture on this. But I may look and answer later if you want.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. Let me check the chat box here. Okay. Yes. No questions. All right, then. Well, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing your knowledge today, Dr. Morissette. And we all can agree that we'll be able to apply the knowledge we gained today in our individual fields. And just I would like to briefly mention that the Prevention Institute is in the process of developing a pamphlet in collaboration with public health nutritionist Andrea Toogood and University of Saskatchewan nutrition students Brianna Wickett and Avery Barnwick. This resource will be available for both download and ordering soon. So we are also in the process of creating a new prenatal nutrition webpage, which will include more and detailed information. And we will share this link to this webpage and the resource once they are ready. Oh, there's one more question. Sorry, I didn't see that. It says, how about your opinion on natural folate supplementation versus folic acid?
Yes, that's a good question. I know that I probably have this one. So there are no clear studies that look at that. So what is sure is that when is folic acid supplement is that we have randomized control trial that clearly demonstrate that it decreases neural tube defects. When it's natural folates, there are no study to date, no clear evidence that it can do the same. We can suppose that it can work, but before we have those answers, I think that we should continue to recommend folic acid and see what science will tell us. But at the end of the day, this is the pregnant woman's decision. So this is what the science say for now to this question.
Thank you so much for the insight. Okay, I see Lisa wrote something about gestational diabetes. Did you have a specific question? Okay, Lisa has a book suggested by a dietitian. Lily, Real Food for Gestational Diabetes.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Lisa. Any thought on this work that is lower carb? So you're asking, Lisa, you're asking about this book, Lily Real Food?
I don't know this book. I cannot answer this one.
Okay.
I will go look into it.
Okay, sounds good. Lisa, if you want to, you can
You can,
contact
yeah, for sure.
Morissette as well. Okay. Thank you so much. So I think that will conclude our webinar today. And when you close this window, you will be directed to a link where you can complete a short survey evaluation of this session. Completing these evaluations help us create new programming and resources that support the healthcare providers and service providers in their work. And we appreciate the time it takes to complete them. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you especially to Dr. Morissette for all this work.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Have a good day.
You too. Bye. Bye, everyone.